Hello, and welcome to R&D Tales, where I sit down with members of R&D to talk about various sets. So today, we're talking about Guilds of Ravnica with Andrew Veen. Hey, Andrew.
Hey.
So why don't you explain who you are a little bit so they know what do you do in R&D?
So you scooped me a little bit on my name. I'm Andrew Veen, but I'm a designer in Magic R&D, primarily on Vision, but I've done some set design stuff too.
Okay.
I'm also currently the white color pie representative in the Council of Colors. Is that my official title? What do we call it?
That's good. Okay, so what have you worked on? What Magic stuff have you worked on?
What Magic stuff? So I've worked on, I was on the very tail end of Vision for Shadows over Innistrad, and then I was on the set design team for Spaghetti, which is Guilds of Ravnica. Since then, I've dabbled on some archery. I was on the teams for, I'm currently on baseball set design, and I was on Vision for a little bit. And then I am on the diving Vision team with you.
You also did cricket, didn't you?
Oh, I did cricket, yeah. I was on cricket. I was on cricket exploratory and Vision, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk.
So many letters.
Let's talk Guilds of Ravnica.
Yeah.
Okay, so what did you do specifically on Guilds of Ravnica?
So on Guilds of Ravnica, I came in sort of during the, this was a transitional time. We were changing a lot of the process. So what would have historically been called Divine, sort of the very tail end of Vision plus the beginning of set design, I was brought in and I was just a member of the set design team. So we do playtesting, we do card design, we do like interpretation of what Vision saw for the set, and we try to execute on that for set design. At the time, I was also on the play design team, so I was looking at Guilds of Ravnica. I want to call it Spaghetti every time. I was looking at GRN from the lens of making the best limited format that we could, but also taking a look at what we wanted to do for Constructed. So but basically trying to make sure that all of the guilds and all of what Ravnica is got to shine true.
So what is the challenges of making a Ravnica set?
There are many. The first is you want to make exciting guild cards and exciting gold cards, and those aren't always one-to-one. Like if you find the best, you know, red-white card, it might not be Boros, and you might find an excellent Azorius card, but that's in the next set. And you also want to find mechanics that can carry more than one card, like a bunch of cards, but aren't strong enough to carry a whole set on their own and aren't complex enough to demand the kind of attention that it would take to learn and master something like Landfall or something that could hold an entire expansion on its back. You want something that's about 20% of that, so you can have 5 of them in a set. And staying true to what's been done before, while also treading new ground, but the new ground has to feel like it's grounded in core Ravnica.
Right, and the other problem with Ravnica sets I know is there's 5 guilds that all overlap.
Yes.
And so not only does each guild have to work in a vacuum, it also has to work with the sets next to it.
You're right. Like, we worked very closely with the team from Ravnica Allegiance to make sure that our mechanics and our limited format made sense next to theirs, even though they weren't designed to be drafted together. They have to be part of the same ecosystem. They have to be part of the same standard. We were also setting them up for some extra work where we would pitch cycles that they had to finish.
Right.
So we pitched the CCDD cards with the 2 different mana symbols of each of the guild's 2 colors. We pitched them the lockets. We pitched a whole bunch of stuff that we sort of started for them and they would finish. And they also informed us and they said, like, listen, we want these kinds of cards. Can you stay away from those kinds of cards? So like, we knew that there was going to be Azorius and Orzhov in the next set, so they probably wanted something like a sweeper, let's say. And so we wanted to make sure that in our set we didn't do something that would preclude them from having the kinds of sweepers that they wanted access to for Standard.
So a little trivia for you. Can you name the cycle in Gatecrash I made? So in Return to Ravnica, I made a cycle in Gatecrash and forced Ken to finish out the cycle in the set before me. What was the cycle?
Gatecrash, so not original Ravnica.
Right, Return to Ravnica. What happened was Ken Nagel ran Return to Ravnica. I co-ran Gatecrash with Mark Gottlieb. And I put a cycle in Gottlieb.
Was it Fuse?
No.
Ah, okay.
I put the charms in Gatecrash, and then said to Ken,
we're
gonna have charms. Do what you want.
You gotta have 5 more charms. Yeah. You did a great job.
Yeah.
They're good.
Okay, so let's dig into Guilds of Ravnica. So what is your favorite cycle? Let's pick a cycle to talk about.
My favorite cycle. Ooh. I love the CCDD cards. There's a special place in my heart. They all took a lot of work to get where they are.
So explain when you say CCDD, what do you mean?
CCDD it costs 2 mana each of the guild's 2 colors. So, for example, if a card costs GG Dub Dub, that's CCDD. And when we refer to like 1 CC, that's 1 RR or 1 Dub Dub.
Okay.
And so CCDD are the 4 mana cards at uncommon that cost both 2 of each of the colors of the guild. Other than that, maybe the split cards, but I think that those are universally beloved, and it's kind of cheating because I'm picking 2
talk
cycles.
about the CCDD cards.
The CCDD cards.
How did those come about?
So they came about because it started with, honestly, Bill saying, I want cards that cost this.
Okay. Bill would be Bill Rose, the VP of R&D.
The VP of R&D. And Bill said, what would it take to get a cycle of cards that cost this? And Eric said, well, I mean, not that much. We're doing a gold set. Like, the mana can probably support it. And so he set out to design a couple, and he came back with the one that remained completely unchanged that sort of balanced the rest of the cycle around it. Was the Selesnya card, which is effectively 2 wolves in a trench coat riding on each other's backs. Then we started thinking like, okay, this is awesome. This is exactly what Selesnya wants. It doesn't have Convoke, which is a little sad. Yeah. But like, it was a large creature that created token creatures when it died. It was a persistent threat, which is something that Selesnya wants. Like, what can we do to give the other guilds these cards? And we got to just go all out. Like, as soon as we thought like we want to have a sort of Spelldrake, the kind of Spelldrakes we always have, like, but what is the Izzet Spelldrake in this set? And what, like, what is the, like, when we found out that we could do, you know, bigger body Eternal Witness, like, that's really exciting, right? And we just went guild by guild to think, like, what is the ultimate limited card that's at a constructed-ish rate? Some of them are definitely constructed.
These are uncommons, right?
These are the uncommons, right? Like, what could we do to make them exciting? Like, they're going to get played in limited. They're going to be opened more frequently than rares, and they're going to cause these exciting moments. And every time you look at it, it's like, yeah, that is a Golgari card. Like, that is an Izzet card. That's a Boros card, right? They're all spot on, and they're all they were targeted to be A+ in quick pointing.
So real quickly, what does that mean when you say something's cost to be an A+? What does that mean?
So when we do quick pointing, which literally is quickly pointing the set to make sure that your limited playtests are not wildly out of balance, we do a lot of balance work that's long pointing and long balancing. But quick pointing is, we're about to do a playtest, send this to a couple play designers and make sure that one color is not like way better than the other colors. And we targeted A+, which is stronger than C, B, and A. And the idea is you would take this card around the time that you would take a Lightning Strike or a Phantom Monster, depending on who you ask. But the idea is this is a card that you could justifiably first pick, and you wouldn't expect to see the card around 5th or 6th pick still in the pack. And it's interesting because normally you can't target something that is that color intensive to be an A+. Like, it's really hard in a standard draft environment, the non-Ravnica, a non-gold set, to tell someone like, yeah, you're going to pick this card with 4 colored mana symbols in it, first pick, right? Like, but in this set, you can expect that. And so we targeted them at A+, and we targeted them at doing something iconic and in theme and on guild, and tried to see how many we could leave at very powerful and limited, very playable and limited, but not game-breaking, and also see if we could get them at or near constructed for each and every one of them.
Okay, well that's what people don't realize is when you make a set, how there's all these little mini kind of like quests you go on.
So many quests.
And that, for example, are these designed to be played in 2-color but not 3-color, for example?
Primarily, yes. There's nothing saying that you can't play them in 3-color, but they were certainly aimed at, you are the Golgari mage, you are the specific guild mage. And so here is the payoff for you. Like, it's very hard in a 3-color deck to cast these on time. It's hard in a 2-color deck to cast these on time. It's possible. It happened in limited quite a bit during playtesting. But the set is designed to support, I don't know if Eric told you the exact numbers, but its goals were. And this was very interesting.
Goals?
So there are 5 guilds in the set, and there's 8 people in a standard draft, right? So he ideally wanted 1 drafter per guild, and then that leaves 3 people, 3-color. So we started doing playtests, and as soon as we started making shifts and moving things around, we started asking at the end of the draft, okay, who's 2 colors, who's 3 colors? We get 5 hands for 2 colors and 3 hands for 3 colors. It was like, we're doing it, it's working. And these are the kind of cards that reward the drafters that are either solidly 2 colors, or they start off in 2 colors and they splash a 3rd color.
So how do you control that? Like, how do you control, we want 5 2-colors and 3 3-colors?
Lots of iteration, just tons and tons of iteration. Like, so if you follow the card story for Justice Strike, for example, Justice Strike is R-dub instant, Target creature deals damage to itself equal to its power.
Okay.
That card moved around a bunch. At some point it cost 3 mana, at some point it was a sorcery, it used to be a common, and the idea was we kept moving this and it had 2 large masters. The 2 masters were, we wanted it to be positioned for the Jeskai deck if you wanted to add blue to your Boros deck. Red, white, blue.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to add blue to your or if you wanted to add either red or white to your blue-red deck, or add the 3rd color, whatever color you needed to add to get Justice Strike.
If you went Naya, it would be green, red, white, green, and it go Jeskai, it's red, white, blue.
But the Jeskai deck we were positioning to be the control deck because Mentor wants you to have a lot of creatures and a lot of attacking, but the Izzet deck wants you to play jumpstart spells and be more nimble. And so they there wasn't a lot of gel holding them together. That was the trickiest 3-color pair or 3-color wedge shard combination.
It's a wedge.
It's a wedge. Okay. It was the hardest one to get together. And so Justice Strike would bounce around doing various jobs. And also, as soon as we started playing it, was like, this card's a lot of fun. It's also very Boros. Let's see if we can make it constructed.
Okay.
But typically, whenever we would see it, when it was R-dub sorcery at common, we had too many 3-color drafters. Like there was there were too many reasons to leave being 2 colors to bring in a card like Justice Strike. So it got moved to uncommon, such that we could support the archetype to the degree that we wanted to support it, but we left it at the aggressive R-dub instant rate because we thought it was a fun constructed card. But like moving that card around was just one of the things we did to keep the numbers at 5 and 3. And honestly, it sounds like a crazy goal. It also, like, it's random cards, right? Like you're gonna open a pack, not every table will break down like this, but toward the end, like we started having really consistently 5 gilded drafters and 3-color drafters.
Well, the other thing we do is we do averages, right? It's not that any one 8-person draft could do all sorts of things.
It'll be all over the place.
Right, it's all average over time.
And our average over time is exactly where we wanted it to be. And honestly, even anecdotally, the individual playtests were super reassuring. Like the people that even drafted a 3rd color and thought they were going to splash and ended up building just the 2-color deck because it was stronger. They had a CCDD card or a powerful rare, and it was like, yeah, see, that's working.
Okay, so here's the next question. Now, before you were a Magic designer, you were a Magic player. Like
for a long time.
When did you start playing? How long have you been playing Magic?
Oh, geez. I started playing in the dark. The first cards that I owned personally were from 4th edition.
Okay.
And I think that's 96 or 97.
Yeah, the dark, well, the dark is earlier than that. Dark's 94.
Yeah, but that's before I owned any cards.
Right, okay.
But like, so I was aware of the game and I played it, but I started playing in earnest when I guess, owned my own cards. But yeah, in the mid-90s.
Okay, so as someone who started playing Magic as a fan long before you worked here, sort of the contrast, like what was it like to be working on a Ravnica set?
Awesome and terrifying. It was all of the things that I wanted from working on a Ravnica set, but it was also just like, I'm working on this thing that so many people love so much, and I'm afraid that I'm not going to get it. Like, there's always more to do too. So like every step of the way, it's like we're making all these strides, we're doing all these things, but it's always just like, is it going to be what people want? Is it going to be as exciting as we want? But probably the best part, the most important takeaway for me was being able to say like, okay, let's make super exciting cards for our favorite guilds. So like when you look at cards like Thousand Year Storm was a card from a mini team, if I remember correctly. So during the course of sets, occasionally we'll run what we call mini teams, which is you assign someone to lead a mini team and they have some people that attend some meetings that focus on one specific problem or one specific cycle or one specific guild or whatever. And Thousand Year Storm came out of that, and it was a rare that wasn't as aggressively costed, and sometimes it made you pay mana, and it moved around a bit. And every time Izzet players would look at it, it was like, man, this is exactly what I want to be doing. And it was like, that card's rare, that card's not mythic, like can't we? And so then it was like, okay, yeah, like let's just give them the everything's a storm card. And like as soon as we wrote that card down, it was like, can we do that? Is that going to be okay? And we gave it to play design, and it's okay. And like watching people, I remember there's one card, Mission Briefing. It's blue. Can't remember if it's an instant or sorcery finally. In any case,
and then they move around. One thing
they move around, yeah.
That sometimes it's hard for us to remember things because it's a moving. Like to you, the audience, like
it's been this for months.
It's always that.
It's always that. Right.
But to us, it's like, wait, it was a sorcery. There was an instant. So it's sometimes hard to remember.
In any case, what it does is it surveils 2, and then you can cast a spell from your graveyard again.
Right.
And that card was a labor of love for all of play design, but Michael Majors in particular. And watching him build tons of decks around this card to make sure that it was both as fun as it could possibly be and not horrendously broken So like watching people get super into it and super passionate and build the decks that like I used to brew. Like Ravnica is when I started getting like serious about tournaments. Original Ravnica, yeah, before I was here, and so watching people attack this new format that I'm making with a bunch of people with the same fervor that I attacked the format with before I worked here, it was really energizing and a lot of fun.
Okay, so what is the thing you're proudest of in Guilds of Ravnica? Like you personally are proudest of?
I am personally proudest of Surveil.
Okay.
So on the team, there was, I'm not sure how much you and Eric delved into it, but Dimir had a crisis. Like we didn't have the perfect mechanic for them. We didn't have the mechanic that gelled super well with the adjacent guilds. And I had this crazy idea that I wanted to do Scry Matters for Dimir. Because like Scry Matters, it's perfect. They manipulate information, and I had a bunch of nonsense designs that both players scried, but I scry more and things like that. And we tried a couple of Dimir mechanics, and after a while, Eric comes up to me and he's like, can you please give me some of your Scry Matters designs? And none of them are in the set, absolutely none. One of them is close. It's the one that whenever you surveil an additional card and it allows you to reshuffle your library. But from there, he said, well, what if we put it in the graveyard so it worked with Undergrowth, which at the time was Necrobloom, and it worked with Jumpstart.
Right.
And it was like, oh, that's perfect. And so Eric took this idea, which was I wanted there to be a Dimir mechanic that rewarded what the Dimir were about. And I feel like previous Dimir mechanics have been great limited mechanics, but none of them spoke to me as like, this is what Dimir is about. And being able to take an idea from not worth it. Like, what's exciting about Scry Matters? Not that much. But Surveil Matters, like Eric took it, turned it into what it is, and I'm super proud that it is something that the fans seem to love. It plays very well. It's a ton of fun.
So here's a question that I keep getting online is, there's a lot of Surveil Matters, but did you guys explore the idea of something more broad that was more backward compatible?
We did. So it turns out that first, with Surveil mattering for Surveil, there's a lot more that you can do that doesn't break when you look at the top of your library. Like, there's a lot of things we wanted to do where it's like, if you see it in the top of your library, we ended up getting a couple of things that were backward compatible, and we correctly on time printed Narcomoeba for the first time.
Okay.
And
there's another. I want to hear that story in a second. We'll get back to that in a second. Okay.
There's also the card that when it goes to your it has the same Narcomoeba trigger. When it goes to your graveyard from your library, it drains 3. And those cards were us saying there are ways to make this interact with the things that used to play in this space in the past, but we also wanted to maintain the newness and the excitement of Surveil. And if it was just Scry Matters, there's a lot more that it hooks into from the past, but it doesn't interact with the adjacent guilds, and it's not something that Dimir players can look at and say like, oh, this is a new thing for my guild, as opposed to something that's been around for Magic's history for decades.
Okay, let's talk Narcomoeba.
Narcomoeba.
So Narcomoeba. So I made Narcomoeba.
I do know that. Yeah.
So the real quick story is I was working on Future Sight, and normally we have a team that fills holes. We have like anybody in the company can submit stuff.
Send out an email to a group of people.
We were doing hole filling for Future Sight, and Mike Turian was the lead developer at the time.
Right.
And he would send stuff out, and then nobody was really good at filling the future shifted cards because they're really, really hard to do.
Yeah.
So they would send them out, get nothing back, and then he would come to me and goes, okay, Mark, we need more.
I need a future shift. Give me another future card. Yeah.
So Narcomoeba and Bridge from Below were done like very last minute. Like literally, I sat down in like 1 half-hour period. I made those 2 cards and turned them in.
Okay.
And I think they were the last 2 cards made in the set.
Sure.
Although I turned Narcomoeba in as a 2/2. Mike made it a 1/1.
I like that it's a 1/1.
So
I think he made
okay.
it
So anyway, how did Narcomoeba come back?
Narcomoeba came back.
Or sorry, got printed for the first time.
Got printed for the first time. So Narcomoeba finally showed up because Eric just thought it was perfect. It was just like, come on, we're doing this thing. Like, this is just where Narcomoeba would live, right? Like a creature that appears out of the shadows.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, this is the place where Narcomoeba should get printed. And I was like, how often do you look at the future shifted cards when you're on a set? He's like, all the time. So yeah, he's always looking for places to finally print the cards that need to get printed. And once Narcomoeba was in the set, honestly, we made sure FFL was okay with it, but it was like, this is probably going to stay. Because it's the perfect set for Narcomoeba to finally get printed.
What? They're from Ravnica. That's where the Narcomoeba's from.
Clearly the flying jellyfish are from Ravnica, obviously. How did we even question it?
Okay, so what is another card that you feel like you guys kind of found this card and then it sort of things formed around it? Any other good sort of...
So there were a bunch of cards that didn't really change.
Okay.
The poster child for this actually is the white common mentor.
Okay.
We figured out very quickly what the white common mentor wanted to be, and everything else that was mentor curved around it.
So what was it? What's white common mentor?
The white common mentor was 2 dub 3/1 mentor.
Okay.
And that's just what set the set.
Right.
So it was like this. We want another mentor creature. Okay, well it has to be off of 3 mana and off of 3 power. And like a lot of the other mentor creatures shifted, and that creature was just our bright line. It was like, let's follow this creature. And honestly, this French vanilla random dork was a huge benefit to find early on, and that's when we really knew that the Boros deck was going to work. Was when that card was fun. And then
so Eric and I did not talk about this too much.
Okay.
What was the challenge of Mentor?
There were 2 huge challenges with Mentor. The first one is it is more complex than we want Boros to be a little. The idea of the Boros it's not complicated. They know what's right. They fight for it. It's not complicated. You're wrong. I'm going to attack you. The Boros are very straightforward, and the way that you play and draft Boros is also straightforward. And these cards are less straightforward than previous Boros cards. I don't think they're out of line, obviously, but it's further along that spectrum of complexity than we normally would have wanted. When you attack with more than 1 mentor creature, stacking the mentor triggers was something where it's like, are we going to ask players to do this? Is this fun? And then as soon as we watched people who were classic Boros players attack and just put counters on their stuff, it was like, yes, we did it. Like if Mike Turian's happy attacking with mentor creatures, you're on the right track. And the other challenge
by the way, real quickly, R&D has learned who each guild, like who are the people that are that guild. And then if we want to know if somebody likes something, like if that guild's gonna be happy, we go to that person and goes,
do you like this?
Do you like this card?
Yeah. So our litmus test for Boros is very often Mike Turian. As far as the other problem was when we were sifting back and forth to try to find a Selesnya mechanic, we wanted to make sure that we didn't fall into the Naya trap, the red, white, green trap, which is sometimes in Ravnica sets or gold sets or synergy sets, it tends to be that because red-white is doing this aggressive low-to-the-ground creature strategy and green-white is doing this token-based low-to-the-ground creature strategy, that if you are red-white, the best color to add is green, and if you're green-white, the best color to add is red. And we tried very hard to make sure that, no, sometimes you will want to add black. You'll want to go Abzan if you're the green-white deck, or sometimes you'll want to add blue to go Jeskai if you're the Boros deck. And ultimately, we succeeded, but Mentor sort of pushed us in directions that made that more challenging. Like Mentor really wants you to have creatures and not jumpstart spells. So that made you want to sort of fall into the Naya trap. But ultimately, I think that you'll never get completely away from it. Like the guild's identities, beyond just the color identity, like Boros and Selesnya have more in common than Boros and Izzet, for example. And so you'll find that that gravitation still happens to some degree, no matter what. But ultimately, without changing too much about Mentor, I think Mentor got handed off from Vision and largely unchanged.
The Boros, Mentor and Undergrowth were actually in the file and design. And the other 3 all happened during set design. So once we tackled those issues, Mentor was a sure thing. Okay, so what was the hardest thing about designing Guilds of Ravnica?
Getting the split cards right.
Okay, we'll talk about split cards.
So the split cards were asking, so first off, hybrid design is very, very difficult. You have to find something that both colors can do at similar rates.
I led design Shadowmoor, okay.
So, and you didn't leave much left. There's just not a whole lot of room left. And on top of that, it's hybrid design, but it's also guild hybrid design. So it's something that both white and green can do, but Selesnya can do, right? And we would come up with effects that we really liked for limited, but they weren't constructed, or we'd come up with effects that constructed wanted, but we really didn't want those at uncommon for limited. And ultimately, instead of having gold or hybrid, we decided no, the best way to do it is hybrid gold, and have the and it didn't matter whether or not most of the power was in the front half or the back half of the card. Just let the design take you where it's going to take you, and then honestly, hope Doug can name them, and he did a great job. But we did not give him an easy task with that.
Well, he did have to completely rewrite how to name split cards.
Yeah, he did. And he nailed it. We were all just like, in the dev comments on a couple of these, it's just like, sorry, Doug. We know. please do it. But yeah, I would say that testing those and getting those right for all of the formats we want them to be playable in, because we also wanted them to be viable in Commander. We also wanted them to be exciting for Brawl. So like there are all of these competing interests, and there's a lot of eyes that are going to be put on these cards because they're a marquee feature of the set. Like people are going to look at them and turn their head sideways and read them.
Yeah.
And then
that's the talent in your hand.
To have them stand up to that test was a challenge. But I think we got there. I think without fail, they're all something to be proud of. Like they're all in guild, in hybrid, exciting cards. They don't disrupt limited. They're a ton of fun and they're constructed. Okay,
but next question. I look behind us.
Yeah.
And I realize that we have 2 planeswalkers. So let's pick one. Who do you want to talk about first?
Vraska.
Vraska. So making Vraska. How did you make Vraska?
Making Vraska. So planeswalker design is a deeply collaborative process.
Yes.
Nobody creates a planeswalker. It takes a village.
Yeah.
And Vraska was, how can we make a Vraska that is true to old Vraska, but is a new play pattern that does something that we're not necessarily used to, but it also had to hearken to what Vraska did in the story. So a lot of Planeswalker design is creatively influenced, a lot of Planeswalker design is FFL influenced, and a lot of Planeswalker design in Vraska's case was Eric influenced. And Eric said, basically we landed on the +1, and as soon as we decided that that was what the +1 was going to be.
What does the +1 do?
The +1 allows you to sacrifice a permanent, might be creature now, and draw a card. And it reads in a very somewhat unappealing way. It's like, why am I doing this? And then you realize, oh, undergrowth. Oh, tokens. Oh, cards that aren't worth cards, but I can make this worth a card. And it really captured the cruelty and ruthlessness of Vraska in a Golgari, undergrowth, late game planeswalker kind of way. And ultimately, like, that card's very powerful. It's a ton of fun to play.
Okay, so Raul, let's talk Raul.
Raul. So
he's behind you, that's fine.
The most story-worthy moment of Raul's design was realizing that we wanted to count spells in exile as well. And for the minus, which lets you do damage equal to the number of instants and sorceries you cast this game. And so we wanted there to be, first off, just a blue-red planeswalker. Like if you like blue-red, but you're not necessarily you just like casting spells and you like playing islands and mountains, we wanted a planeswalker that makes sense and is fun. We also wanted to make it feel like Raul, the return of Raul, and Raul is in center stage. Like Raul in Guild of Ravnica is the main character, right? And so it had to be all of these things at once. And then we realized that we were telling you, because this was Jumpstart was the 5th or 6th iteration of that mechanic while Raul was being designed. And so we decided, like, oh man, all of these things are great. We really like Jumpstart, but every time you Jumpstart a spell, Raul's ability gets worse. I wish I didn't have to do that. And it was like, it doesn't have to be this way. We can just count exile. As soon as we did that, we appended it to the Chimera, the Spell Drake as well, and everything else fell into place from there. It follows like the predictable Planeswalker pattern of like +1 for some card advantage, minus for some protection and removal, and then minus a bunch for an ultimate. But we do it in a way where it's like, yeah, here's the parts of the Planeswalker you know. Whenever you do this game mechanic, you understand this is how the Planeswalker works. But it's also Raul, and it's also Izzet, and it's also blue-red.
Did you guys ever talk about flipping a coin?
Oh yeah, a bunch. And then we realized that that wasn't really core to Raul's identity. Like it's something that Raul does, and it's chaotic, and it's very Izzet. Like the idea is it's probably upside. Honestly, it's a lot of upside. It might be a ton of upside. It might be a little upside, and you might miss. But this Izzet or this Raul, there was not a spot for it. But yeah, I mean, if you look at previous incarnations of Raul that ultimately didn't get printed. I would say about a quarter of them had flip a coin.
Flip a coin, okay. So what else? What else? Like what is your favorite story about designing Guilds of Ravnica?
My favorite story about designing Guilds of Ravnica was probably convincing play designers that they should play walls in their decks. Like there were a lot of moments where early on when we were playtesting, I was having a lot of success with Golgari. Like I was just, I was winning with these decks, and then other people would try to draft it, and I would draft a different deck, and ultimately they weren't winning as much. It was like, what am I doing? It's like, well, there's just this B03 wall that surveils 2. Like that card is really good in this deck. It's a 1-drop. It fills your graveyard for undergrowth. It lets you surveil if you want the cards, because ultimately you want to make sure you have the right draws coming up. And when it dies, ultimately, it's saved you some life and is another card for undergrowth. It's like, yeah, but like it's got to be a C, right? Like going back to quick pointing, it's not.
Yeah.
And when Michael Majors, this was the first set that I was on set design and play design for, and there was a bit of imposter syndrome. Like I wasn't sure, like I don't have a Pro Tour win under my belt. Like, and I'm playing with people who are, you know, in the Hall of Fame, who have Pro Tour wins. I was like, do I really belong here? And when he came up to me after he drafted a Jeskai deck, he drafted Is It with Boros, and he was like, yeah, you were totally right. That 1U05 wall, my deck would have been way better if I took that instead of another burn spell. And it's like, I know. And so realizing that this format was dynamic enough to sort of, after, and we drafted the set by this point, maybe a dozen, maybe 13 or 14 times, still learning about the set and having discussions with people who I consider to be way better at Magic than me, and having them realize like, oh, hey, yeah, no, that like that's supposed to be there. And it's like, yeah, we put it there. It's supposed to, like, it's working. You should have this thing. And when you're looking at a format where you've got guilds that are slow and guilds that are medium speed and guilds that are fast, it's always a challenge to find a way to make the gameplay, like Boros is the specter of the format, right? Like you have to be able to either race Boros or outlast Boros, but you also don't want to pigeonhole Boros into only winning in the first 5 or 6 turns, right? And so finding ways to make a common just one more toughness or one less mana or go in one more deck or have one more piece of synergy, and have it so that game against Boros, like when you play your control deck against Boros, they win game 1, you win game 2, and then game 3, it's up in the air. That was, it felt like winning.
Okay, well, thank you. I want to thank you for joining us today, and thank you guys for joining us. This has been R&D Tales,
Yeah,
and
thanks.
We'll see you next time. Thanks, Andrew.